Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hey, Heidi here with another announcement, which I feel like after all these weeks, I've just been doing announcement after announcement after announcement, but God is doing so many amazing things with this podcast. Anyways, I actually wanted to give a shout out before we get into the episode. This next guest, Stephanie, I have to give a shout out to her because she was actually my first sponsor for this podcast. So she was the first one to look at the sponsorship packages and was like, oh my gosh, this is a steal. Let's do this. As a podcaster herself, she understands how podcasting, advertising, and podcasting is evergreen. So the advertisements on the podcast will be on here forever, in the show notes and in the show descriptions and in the newsletter and everything. So shout out to Stephanie. Thank you so much for investing in this podcast. And also just investing in the mission. Like, you understand what I'm doing here, the mission that I'm on, and you invested in this. And I will forever be grateful to you for being the first sponsor of this podcast. The podcast has officially 3 sponsors, and I've gotten sponsors also for the event that's coming up. But in particular, that have people who were like, okay, I want to invest it within the podcast itself, because again, understanding the mission, understanding that these ads on the podcast will be here forever. This is evergreen marketing. So thank you so much for that. But okay, so officially we have 3 sponsors. All the information, you can find them in the show description and show notes. And lastly, if you have not bought a ticket for the event, please do so. The link to that is also in the show notes and show description. Come hang out with me. Come hang out with past guests. Come hang out with local immigrant business owners in Central Florida. If you are thinking of sponsoring, let me know. Send me an email and I can get you those packages. And yes, come hang out. Have a good time. There'll be appetizers, soft drinks. Again, I'll be there. Past guests will be there, friends and family. So come hang out, come network, come celebrate all the good things that are happening with this podcast. And if you have any questions, I'm always available either through Instagram or email. All that information is in the show notes and show description. Thank you once again for being here week after week, listening to these incredible stories, supporting this podcast, supporting this mission. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz. And today I have Miss Stephanie with us. She is going to be talking about her upbringing and her experience coming to the United States. Welcome, Stephanie.
Well, thank you for having me, Heidi. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you so much for being willing to share your story and your journey. So if you could just introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you do, and how was childhood in Panama?
Awesome. Well, like she said, my name is Stephanie Rubio. I was born in Panama City, Panama. By day, I always say I am a housewife, and by night, I run a digital marketing agency where our specialty is in email marketing. It's been a long journey, 8 years of owning an agency. Prior to that, I had many hats, primarily in real estate. My family owned and operated a short-term rentals company here in Central Florida. So while in high school, I went ahead and I practiced a little bit of short-term, long-term real estate management as well as HOA management. Um, Once I graduated from high school, I tried to stay within that field of property management for a bit. That's where I believe a lot of my specialty in sales and marketing come in. I also am, you know, I do have a degree. So, which I mean, looking back now, I'm thinking a lot of the degrees that I have, I don't actually put them into practice in my day-to-day profession, but that is what it is. So I do have a degree in business administration with a minor in accounting. And then I have two AS degrees that are not even worth mentioning because they're in the medical field. Um, so very, very far from what I do now. And then I also did work for a very, very popular entertainment brand here in Central Florida. You can only guess which of the two, where I did also sales and marketing. Corporate was not for me. And so I decided that I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. I want to say very, very early on in my life. I just didn't know exactly how I was going to come to that.
Yeah.
But I did land in marketing eventually, and I love it. I love it so much.
Oh, awesome. Well, we'll get into all your businesses later. I love giving the opportunity to the guests to share about how they got into their business and what they do, and then also provide a call to action if anyone wants to get in touch, where they can get in touch, because a lot of my guests do have their own business, which
Mhm,
is, part of that common misconception that immigrants are here to steal jobs. And it's like,
mhm.
nope, a lot of them
Yeah.
have their own business and they are creating jobs and making money for themselves. So I'm really glad to talk about that later on, and to touch on that, and just thank you so much. So tell us about Panama.
Panama was Panama is my heart. Like I said, I was born and raised in the city. My family's from a very small province we call El Interior. So a very small province in Panama, in a very small town. So it's almost as if you want to say a town within a town within a town, if you want to put it that
Oh,
way. So
wow.
tiny, tiny, tiny community. So once my grandmother decided that she was done with the countryside, if you will, she migrated to the city
Mm,
where my uncle, my mother were raised. I came obviously much later, and I lived with my grandmother, my uncle, and my mom in a home that my grandmother worked very, very hard to build in the city. Went to private Catholic school there for 7 years, and it was a childhood filled with a lot of family. I remember just a lot of family always around, and a lot of community. It was definitely one of those experiences, and it was a happy childhood. Um, the beaches in on the weekends, major all the major holidays being celebrated with just cousins and extended family members, and very fun times, very, very fond memories as well.
oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And how older were you when you and your family moved to the US?
I was 11 when we moved to the US. Now, at 7, my mother married my stepdad, my father. So that the introduction to that American lifestyle happened earlier than us even leaving Panama,
Mm,
because once they got married, I integrated into the military base there, the Air Force base there. If anybody listening has been stationed in Panama or was Howard Air Force Base. Um, so I quickly became very introduced while still being in Panama to that American lifestyle, and the American culture. So those 4 years before we even came here, that introduction happened, and the I started noticing those like culture shock moments
yeah.
very early on. Very early on. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, share some with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. So I remember now in Catholic school, I remember I took some English classes, for example, and that was probably the first time where I was like, this is going to be different. So one of the things off the bat, not necessarily culture shock per se, but something that I did have to experience was I was held back. So
Mm.
I remember I believe I was in second or third grade at the time, and I remember being held back a year because they wanted me to work on my English. I don't know if that would have been a choice that I would have made as a parent, which I'm not, but I wonder if that would have been a choice that I would have
Mm-hmm.
made, knowing how fast I catch on to things and what a fast learner I am. I don't know if I would have made that same choice, but that happened. And then, so I was always the tallest one in class
Mm.
because of that. um, Forever until I graduated from high school. I was always like the tallest kid. And but I remember the first day of school when when we already were settled in the base, and we moved into this. I remember it being this beautiful two-story home. Military base in Panama was a dream. Uh, if anybody has been stationed in military bases outside of the U.S., they can attest to this. Typically, the housing is very nice. Not like a lot of people can make those comments about military housing here in the U.S. No, military
Mm-hmm.
housing off the U.S. is very, very nice. And so that was also a culture shock right away because we lived, like I said, in a small two-bedroom home in the city, very urban setting. Yeah, it was very different. So that was starting to look like my life was really starting to change even at that moment.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember the first day of school, the teacher asked me a simple question. She asked the class really, but obviously she's trying to get me, to even talk because I wasn't even speaking to anybody. I was so nervous.
Mm.
And she said, "Could you tell us where the period goes in this sentence?" And I can understand what she's saying, but I'm like, I don't know how to say it. That the period
Yeah.
goes at the end, and I remember being so nervous. But you know what? I just got up and I grabbed her marker from her hand. I said, "Can I have the marker?" Like I'm pointing to the marker, like, "Can you
Yeah.
give me the marker?" And I just walked up to the whiteboard and I just put the period at the end.
Yeah.
So it was that right away. I was like, this is going to be a lot tougher than I thought. But one thing that I think came out of that is that it really built on my confidence. Which I was already a confident kid, but I felt like I was really going to need to get my confidence up. And I remember understanding that. Like, I'm going to have to really work hard at being even more confident.
Mm.
Um, so at 7, to experience that really helped those 4 years. It really helped. So, because once we moved here, while it was still a shock, and we'll talk about why that was in a minute, it wasn't it wasn't as tough on the societal side of things, if
Okay.
that makes sense. Yeah, for me, the shock really came in leaving our family.
Mm.
Yeah, my mother's side of the family, the majority of them are there. Unlike in other immigrant families, my husband's, for example, my husband was born and raised in New York, but his family is from Guatemala. Family members chose to move to the US over time. But my family, and I always find this so weird. I'm like, nobody wanted to come to the US. Like, no one has ever felt this inkling to be like, I desire to be in America. Like
Interesting.
yes, very, very, like they're all they're all professionals, some have
Yeah.
businesses and they're thriving, and they're just like,
Yeah.
they don't
Okay.
really see the US the way that we.
Well, you're bringing me memories to another guest who also is like here by not by herself because she has her immediate family, like she has a
Mhm.
husband, her child, and everything, but like her family's still back in their home country, and she was like, "Well, over there they're actually upper class, so if they come to the United
Right,
States, they will be not upper class and starting
right.
all over pretty much." So I was like, so that makes sense. That makes sense as to why. Like, there's no need.
Yeah, and I really and I wonder because the experience. I mean, I do believe that there some you can classify them as middle to upper class. I just feel like because of the way that culture is here, um, where we a lot of us that work very hard. I love, for example, your own story where you're just a, I mean, listen, everyone that's listening, okay, because I know I'm gonna have to give her flowers for a second. I'm always amazed. Like I said, I'm not a mother, right? But you're a mother, wife, you are putting your degree into practice, but then you're also pursuing entrepreneurship. Those are a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
And life back home, for example, it's not like that. It's not like that. Like here, for example, if I want to paint a wall, I go to Home Depot, for example, I'll grab a gallon of paint and I'll paint the wall on the weekend. Over there, it's like if I need to paint the wall, I'm going to hire someone.
Mm,
I'm going to hire someone to do it. There's a lot of opportunities to have a lot of help around you, if that makes sense. And labor is probably not as expensive as it is here. And so I think the lifestyle is a little bit more laissez-faire in general than it would be here.
okay.
Like on the weekends, people do not work. A lot of people do not work on the weekends. Like a lot of office workers do not work on the weekends. Um, Holidays are a lot of those federal holidays. You will not see a lot of stores close, even not just like banks, but like even stores where it took the US years to close a Walmart
Oh, the
for
pandemic.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the pandemic, right? And so
Mm,
like you would never hear of that back home. Like stores open on Christmas Eve, you would never hear. So I think they see that. They see, yeah, you can make it, you can thrive, you can have and all of these, things, and the resources here are phenomenal. However, putting it into the lifestyle, um, that's Caribbean esque lifestyle that we have back home, it's not worth it to them. And
yeah.
yeah, so that differed a lot growing up because my mother acclimated herself to the lifestyle here. And obviously, I grew up military. My father did not retire until much later, once we had already moved from Texas here into Central Florida. Um, Life was very straight and narrow, very do, and then we'll rest once we do, if that makes sense. So
Yes. Yep.
it was a very different lifestyle for me here, for sure.
So your mom and your dad
Mhm.
moved to the States because of he was in the military?
Because he was in the military, yes,
Okay.
we moved to us again, another small town. So I came from the city in Panama to a very small town, which did help in retrospect, I believe. Also, the integration of living in the U.S. To a small town in San Angelo, which is San Angelo, Texas. And San Angelo is what, if somebody was to ask me what home is here in the US, it would be Texas.
Oh,
As yeah, yeah, Texas is a fantastic, amazing. Growing up in Texas was, if you needed to have a quintessential example of America, if you want to say what is America, it's Texas. And listen, all of that and what that entails. Yes, it's football Friday nights. It's country. It's an experience. But you have to experience it at least once to
mm,
actually know what America is and what it stands for. It's Texas, not today Texas. I think today Texas is a little bit different, but I remember things being a lot different when I grew up in Texas. Maybe I was just too little to notice. certain things.
Mm, okay.
but
Yeah.
I had a great experience in Texas. It was wonderful. Still in the military community. My parents were still in the military, my dad, but um we lived off base now. They
Mm,
chose to live off base because they wanted to purchase property and stuff. So we lived off base, and then they didn't have schooling in that Air Force base. So I went then to public school for the very first time. um, but again, it was a small town, and so schools were wonderful, and a lot of
okay.
Latinos. So it didn't feel that different than being back home. It felt different because I got to experience a different you know different cultures, but wonderful and fantastic, and to this day Mexican is still one of my favorite cuisines. Mexican food.
And so moving from Texas to Florida, I'm assuming that was a cultural shock for you.
That was when that in the whole trajectory, that was the biggest culture shock,
Mm,
honestly, because now, if Texas is what I would consider that traditional American experience, Florida is confused.
that's hilarious.
Florida is very confused. Florida does not know what it is, and it's a lot of people in the melting pot.
Oh yeah.
Now, when my father decided that he wanted early retirement, because he retired early, um, he he wanted to be near my three brothers, my three stepbrothers who live with their mom here in the coast. And they're still there. They're still here in the coast. And then obviously it's a hop and a skip away from Puerto Rico, which is where my dad is from. So that's why Florida was chosen. It was the most obvious choice. Um, so we came here, and here was very different. I went back into private school once I came
Mm,
here, not by choice, but the I noticed very quickly that my parents, specifically my mother, was very fearful of here.
oh,
Yeah, she was very fearful of Florida. I don't know why. I don't know if it was conversations that she was having. Um, I wish I would have stayed in public school, looking back, and they would have made that decision. But you don't have choices as a kid. You're just kind of, you do what you're told.
yep.
And so yeah, so I went back into the private school system, and private school was very different, and it was a good experience. I just don't feel like I received those 4 years in high school. I feel are very important to additional development for any child. And I do believe strongly, as someone who experienced private school in different stages of my life, that unless you're going to a preparatory school and receiving possibly additional tutoring of any kind, whether it's college prep tutoring or you're receiving tutoring for specific subjects, I do not believe that there's a lot of weight to the private school systems here in the US. I do still believe in the public school system being the best option for kids. Obviously parents will make those decisions based on character and what their child has going on and their own temperaments and things, but I do believe that to pay private school pricing for subpar education is, in my opinion, not worth it.
Okay.
Not worth it. Yeah, I don't believe I received what I should have. So I did on my own. I did have to advocate for myself with my parents to say, listen, I need experiences because I'm not getting any.
Yeah.
So thankfully, here in Florida, if your child does attend a private school that doesn't offer a subject or doesn't offer an activity, you can approach the like a public school and you can have that conversation where you can maybe join a team or be involved in some way. They sometimes those, I don't know if that's still possible today. I mean, I graduated a while ago. So, but back then I was able to do that. So I was able to still have some of that experience and meet more kids because that was another thing. The private schools here were very small.
Mm,
So it limited me a lot, a lot. So then going into college, that was different also because now we're going to bigger settings than even
yeah.
that. So yeah, so that was different. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my goodness. And
Mhm.
so let's talk about visiting Panama for the first time after officially moving to the US. How was that experience for you?
The first time we went back, I was 14. So it was we were already living in Texas, and it was a year before we came here. That was very different. That's when I was almost 15. Like I said, I was 14. So I remember seeing things in a very different light at that point. But um, the reconnection with family, I noticed it very quickly that it wouldn't be the same. Uh, I left very young at 11. However, because I had already been integrated since I was 7, um, that reconnection with family along the way, and I was right in thinking that because as I grew older, a lot of that time, that spans, affected a lot of relationships, unfortunately. um I think that that could have been another, it's just a point to consider for families, right? If you have kids and you've moved to the US, I think it's up to the parents to, it's not always up to the kid. You have to get involved in how that child continues to interact with, whether it's cousins, aunts, uncles, and extended family
Mhm.
members. So more frequent visits back home, I think would be and would have been in my case prudent to continue to instill some of those strong lines of communication and relationships with family, because I remember feeling like an odd person out.
Oh,
Like I don't
yeah.
understand a lot of, and then as I got older, that worsened because then there was a lot of mentality shifting for me.
Mm.
Um, and even to this day, I think there's a huge mentality difference in how we think and how we see things, where I think a lot of that would still be there, but it wouldn't be as pronounced, if that makes sense. So I think parents have to consider that. I know travel is hard. I know,
Yeah.
when travel is hard, it's not, it's not a hop and a skip away. It's not always economically sound, or prudent given whatever the financial situation is, but it's something to think about when you're moving, because you do lose time and you do lose some of that connection for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Um, let's get into your work. So you mentioned earlier digital marketing agency. And so you knew that you wanted to get into entrepreneurship, but you weren't sure like how those that was going to come about or what that was going to look like. So tell us about that, about your experience of like, okay, you want to do this to like, okay, this is actually what I'm going to pursue.
Yeah. So I knew the moment I knew, I remember it very clearly. My uncle and my aunt who had the short-term property management company here in Central Florida for many, many, many years. I remember having a conversation with my uncle about this. I was 17 and I would work in the office on the weekends, sometimes after school, just like as a part-time, high school gig, if you want to call it that. And I remember having a conversation with my uncle, and I said to him, I really want to own a business. Like how,
Mm.
like I remember asking him a question, like questions like, how did you get started? How did you know this was what you wanted to do? I asked him about funding, a business plan. Like I remember having that convo with him. And off the bat, one of the first things he said was, this is very hard.
Mm.
This is very hard. You're going to do this every single day. There's no holidays, there's no weekends, there's no punch in. I remember he said, there's no punch in and there's no punch out. You're in it every day, all day. You'll think about it when you're sleeping. You'll think about it when you're on vacation. There's no disconnect when you're on vacation. There's no autoresponder, he said. Ah, so funny. And then I remember thinking, oh, that's great. But like, you're your own boss. You have all this freedom, like to do your own thing, right? You
Yeah.
know, those questions, right? And he's like, yeah, but it's a little bit more than that, you know? And yes, that business did, you know, to your statement of it offering employment, that business employed about, I want to say it was about 35, 50 employees, give and take, during the holidays, for example, because it was in essence a vacation homes management company. During the holidays, it was a big crew, for example, in just like the maintenance department, or in the department of the home cleaners, right? There
Yeah.
was a lot of people constantly in and out, in and out. They were always hiring for the holidays. It was like a lot of support, and I remember the way that it supported the Latino community here. I loved that. I loved seeing that, and I wanted to, and the lives that I remember they changed between the two of them, my aunt and uncle. Um, I remember that was what I loved the most out of that experience. And so once it was my turn to decide what it was that I wanted to continue to pursue, once I had already gotten married, my husband was already off and into the races and doing his career. I remember him telling me, my husband said, so what's next? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I just want to support whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And that has been the case since.
Mm.
And I remember telling him, well, if we're gonna have kids, I definitely want to be home. If we're gonna have kids, I remember having
Yeah.
that convo, and he said, "Okay, so you want to be home, right?" And I was like, "Well, I think I want to be home. So I want to do something from home, because the idea originally was that I would be home with kids. So that is where that sort of being home, if you will, that desire to be home, it came from that. Now, obviously, life throws us a different type of curveball here and there. And we ended up not having kids through, and that finding came through infertility treatments for many years, almost a decade,
Mm.
until we finally decided to close that chapter. But that was happening even while I had launched my business. And so the
Wow.
launch, yeah, so the launch really happened one day. I remember it being, and I call this my launch day because it was the day that I bought. Um, the day that I bought my domain was the day that I applied for my registration in the state of Florida, was February 1st, 2016. But the year before that, so the year prior in 2015, I worked on a business plan. That entire year, I spoke with, I was still doing freelance here and there, but I was mostly, you know, gathering a lot of data, seeing what it was that I wanted to do. How was it that I wanted to pursue this, and in what way and in what capacity? Because capacity has always been in my mind. Like, what is success going to look like for me? And from the very beginning, I was very square that I wasn't going to be direct hiring. Um, and it's funny because a lot of these conversations are being had now. about work from home, and people are having conversations now about the success that some startups like MailChimp, ConvertKit, a lot of these startups that started in the last recession that we had in 2008 that have been very successful. A lot of these companies do not direct hire. A lot of those companies have independent contractors.
Yeah.
So I took 2015 to really solidify what it was that I wanted to do. And I remember just one afternoon on February 1st, 2016, I remember that day being ready. And I thought, I'm just going to, we were on the couch watching a movie in the living room. And I looked over and I said, honey, I'm going to buy my domain right now. And I'm going to register the business right now. And he's like, all right, let's go. Like he was ready to go. He's
Yes.
like, yes, let's go. You got this. And I did it. I just bought it. And I was like, okay, so it's official. That's it. There's no turning back.
Yeah.
And I started and launched Subverve as a full service agency, meaning I was doing it all. I was doing brand, like from brand strategy, brand design, um, design, marketing design, all the way through what I do now, which is content marketing and email marketing. So
Yeah.
I was doing it everything. Obviously, in the middle, you have things like social media marketing and management as well, web design. Um, Over the years, a lot of those services I have phased off. And then we've landed in it's email marketing, what we do here and what we specialize in. And I'm very proud of it. It's my baby
Oh,
and I love it so much. I love what I do every single day. I'm motivated to continue to offer just great service, and always keeping my uncle in mind. My uncle was a client first. Um, he was a client first type of business owner. I think a lot of those old fashioned uh, ideals for running a business where the customer is always right. We've lost a lot of that along the way. Um, where I think entrepreneurship now teaches you in the general sense that the customer isn't always right. And that we as entrepreneurs have a lot of power in the way that we manage our clients. But the truth is, we do not have clients, we do not have a business. If we do not have people to service, we
yeah.
are not servicing anybody. And then a lot of these spaces look like very expensive hobbies. And
Yes.
so, and so um, I am a client first advocate. And one thing that I cannot miss in saying is one culture shock, if you will. I want to say what would we call it? Not a culture shock, an entrepreneurial shock that I realized when I came into the internet space was the conversation of coaching.
Mm,
I remember being so shocked at this idea of coaching because I don't come from a school of where people do this
yeah.
practice, where people get coaching. That was so new to me. And to this day, I haven't had any coaching. Um, but I am also someone that does believe in mentorship. And I advise people always that if you are going to want to be successful in business, get yourself a mentor and get yourself a mentor from somebody that's seasoned and preferably uh, local and that has some form of a brick and mortar. It could be the pizza shop, mom and pop place that's been open for 25, 30 years down the street. It could be the real estate broker that helped you buy your house. It could be somebody that has experienced recessions, that has experienced inflations, um, has experienced hiring, firing, um, whose business affords people um, the ability to purchase homes, send kids to college, um, and is an actual employee. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to be learned from these type of individuals, and I am also an advocate for mentorship, which doesn't cost anything if you have a good mentor. Won't cost you anything, but I believe there's a lot to learn in that. Yeah, so that was one of the things that I have really been like a fish out of water in this space in the last 8 years, where
Mm.
I believe in coaching. I do believe that there are good coaches out there, but I do believe that we need to tighten a lot of the I think the laws around coaching need to either be established or need to be tightened in that space for sure.
Okay. And so I love wrapping up with this last question, which is, what does the American dream mean to you?
Very good question. And in preparing for our interview, I thought about this a lot, because I I'm someone that my heart belongs now to two different places. I
Mm.
feel like my soul and the essence of who I am understands, that I am a Panamanian here, but I love and adore the opportunity that this country has um, afforded myself, and then people like my husband and his family. I see it very pronounced in his story, um, and a true the true essence of an immigration story. I always refer to his father and his mother migrating from Guatemala here, and that has been just amazing to just learn more from. And so for me, the American dream is, in essence, what you want to make it.
Yeah.
It's that I believe fully. It could be whatever you want to make that to be. If you want to become an entrepreneur in this country, you can. If you want to become a professional woman, man, person in any career field, the opportunities are there. If you want to be a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mother, taking care of your children and offering that support to your family, you can. It is truly a land where there's a lot of opportunity if you work really, really hard. And I also do believe that there's a lot of space for learning and growth, I think, within our own community of Latinos here, but then also in the general sense. But I'm proud to contribute as a Latina to um, the positive side of things, if you will.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for sharing your story, your journey, and everything. And how can people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way for people to connect with me is going to be through LinkedIn. So people can follow me there. Just search Stephanie V. Rubio over on LinkedIn, and I'll provide Heidi with that link, that direct link for the show notes. And you can follow me there and just send me a request, send me a DM if you want to connect professionally. That's going to be the best platform to do that.
Awesome. Yes, I will definitely include the links in the show notes and the show description. And thank you so much once again for sharing your story and your journey, Stephanie. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.